At a time when the world is in the grip of multiple wars, global political and economic ferment, and the rise of the phenomenon of the strongman, I thought it would be interesting to engage Dr. Robert Thurman, the widely respected Buddhist scholar, writer, and intellectual, on one of his favorite themes, that of the need for inner revolution, which, among other things, focuses on individual happiness. The 84-year-old Dr. Thurman, who has enjoyed 6 decades of close friendship with the Dalai Lama, says it is now his life's mission to defeat defeatism that is taking hold across the world. He spoke to MCR. Welcome to Mindshare Reports, Dr. Thurman. It's always a great pleasure to have you.
Oh, thank you, Mayank. It's very pleasant to talk with you always. You wrote such a wonderful biography of His Holiness in the past.
No,
And
that's
there are
very
new
much.
biographies coming out, so it's a rich field, actually, but you're a pioneer.
Thank you so much. One of your abiding scholarly pursuits has been inner revolution in individuals, which would eventually lead to enlightened society.
Yes,
Within that, you've written about the perils of unquestioning obedience, as you call it,
yes,
which has become a feature of many societies now,
yes.
including here in the US. How do you think Buddha's idea of inner revolution can be scaled in
Okay,
current
I'll tell you how. The old theology of the nasty God that everybody has to be scared of, which actually the leader in breaking through that is India, not particularly necessarily Buddhism, Hinduism, Jainism, whatever they were doing in India. They broke through that with the Upanishads and Buddhism and Jainism and various other isms, and they always continue to do so. Sikhism later, and many Baha'i, all kind of things. And the reason is India's economy in the ancient Axial Age and before even was the Garden of Eden. It was the wealthiest by far alluvium in the plant on Eurasia, at least. We don't know what really happened in Mexico and South America and the mound builders in North America. We don't really know because we only have some fake idea about it through historians who subconsciously are justifying the genocide of the native people by the European people. So they don't give us a true picture. But so never mind that. Just within Eurasia, the Indians led the way, and the Indians, not the Westerner have the stupid fake idea of rugged individualism. We're all such great cowboys, Meanwhile, I used to tell my students, just to give them a sense of India and the history, Indian history type, of course, I used to say, okay, if you're a rugged individualist, let's see if you can keep up with the Indians. Here's the homework assignment. Strip down, wear a loincloth, not to get, really be too embarrassing. Paint your stripes on your forehead, get a trident in one hand and a bowl in the other, go down Broadway and make a kind of cow caca hairdo and go down Broadway and demand a free lunch from Ollie's Noodle Shop and see how it goes. And then, meanwhile, there's 30 million or 50 million of people like that in India who are admired and supported. I mean, of course, people will make jokes about them, and somebody will not want to feed them one time or something. But actually, they exist, and they're kind of model of I'm going to use my life to meet God. I love God and be bhakti about God, whatever. Make an offering to God. So here's the thing: the way that can scale is the monotheistic people, or the Chinese ones who made their emperor into God, Tiandi, the son of heaven, which is a complicated case, but they have to listen to God, because not one of those gods who says I'm almighty and you have to worship me and blah, blah. Yeah, they say that, they're recorded as saying that in their books, but every single one of them says, don't kill people. Be kind to them. Don't destroy anybody. Be ethical. Don't cheat. Muhammad didn't allow them to charge interest. He was against the banks. I mean, they all taught altruism, and which means they all denied their own omnipotence by saying you have to be ethical because you will make a mess out of your life if you don't. meaning you have agency to design and create your world. We are co-creating together. So the
Right.
projection of omnipotence through a fake theology, which is always backed by the kings who hire the theologians who will flatter them, and they create some sort of a model of themselves that they're omnipotent, divine right of kings. I can the Kshatriya can kill anybody. The arms of the Kshatriya are the arms of God. That was the Indian one, the old Vedic Indian one, and that's all the divine right of kings. The national church and all this, and they take the teaching of like Jesus, who said, "Turn the other cheek," gave his own body, and they say, "Let's have a crusade." And so ignoring the teaching of him and Moses before him, don't kill people, don't do this, don't do that, and so they have to catch up with India in a way, you could say, the other dominant Eurasian cultures with their technologies and the industrializing of their own kleshas, mental addictions to lust, greed, hatred, anger, fear, and therefore somebody saved me. So now the king is saving me. The dictator, oh yes, he's saving me by killing all my Ukrainian relatives.
Right.
He's saving me by destroying all the Arabs. And the Jewish people are all intermixed with all the Arabs anyway. They all live in you could call Palestine Zion, and then they all live there, and they're all equal citizens, and you have no more problem. They all work, and they do really wonderful work. And they're friends of the whole 1.5 billion people in the Middle East. So there's no religious difference between them whatsoever, and really no racial difference. It's sort of desert, nomadic, semi-nomadic people. So like the Tibetans, So I forgot what the question was.
No, it was about scaling in a revolution.
And then Mother Earth is helping, because Mother Earth is showing that she has limits. The garden that we live in, where there are plants around us that give us back oxygen when we spew out carbon as we exhale. And we live in symbiosis with the beautiful plants, and there's plenty of water, and the air temperature is within a reasonable range in the last few a million or so years, and a few more million. Yeah, it won't be forever, but we have a place to find out what it's all about and to really enjoy ourselves, have a happy time, be friendly with other people, love people, be loved by them. And this is what somehow all of nature and everything is conspired to give us this garden. And there's no reason to destroy it. And we don't need to, and we all have strength enough not to.
Right.
And so we just have to people have to be more practical. Our science, for example, is still backward, our Western science. Indian science is better because it can use our external, Bahya Vidya, what you'd call external science, materialist science. They have that. They have very good Ayurvedic medicine, and very good herbal medicine, and very good lifestyle medicine, and very good ethical medicine. And Western thing about we don't have a mind, a brain, a soul, it's all this life, and our life is meaningless, and that's existentially mature, and that's intelligent, is ridiculously stupid, actually, and totally not only unscientific, but a little bit insane. What it means is you and I, Mayank, we're yakking away here. Actually, I'm yakking more, I apologize, but that's the plan. But, it's just two biological robots. It's all going to be meaningless. It has no meaning.
Right.
No consequence. We could kill each other and it wouldn't matter. And so that means people feel worthless. That adds to the worthlessness, meaninglessness of everything. So then, okay, let's all commit suicide. Who cares? Do you know what I mean? It's all going to be all actually nothing already. Do you know what I mean? Einstein knew that. MC squared equals MC squared, and then make a bomb, chain reaction.
Right.
See, you never accelerate a light beam, a supposed photon. You cannot accelerate to an infinite speed. What he's saying is that there is infinite energy in the universe, and you never. It has to already be there, if there's such a thing. And he kind of showed that in extremity, even the atoms are unstable.
Right.
Therefore, everything is unstable. But whether I'm in agony, being burned in a napalm fire by somebody shooting a missile at my kitchen breakfast table, or enjoying myself, snoozing happily in bed with my eye ring telling me that I did a good job sleeping, whatever it is. I mean, that's hugely meaningful. And then if I'm in agony, I can't be of any benefit to anybody else. And if I'm happy, I can do a lot of benefit to other people. So that's just so simple. It's right in front of everybody's face. And what can make me unhappy in the nicest physical circumstances is a distortion in my mind. So my mind has power in nature. I know that. Even if I don't want to listen to Schrodinger, Niels Bohr, find every kind of quantum person with their collapse of their wave function. Their wave function of materialism collapsed, actually.
Right.
100 years ago this year. Should be a great celebration. And one of the clues they have since then, the recent one, thanks to Vera Rubin, is the discovery of dark matter and dark energy.
Right.
That's the discovery of Shakti.
Indeed.
Invisible power that's 10 times more powerful than the bright matter, So
Right.
that's putting back the genders in balance, female and Shiva Shakti, male and female. And that's the females, they can become warlike and crazy too in a male patriarchal world, but they tend to be more aware of their interconnectedness with other people more totally. And so they will tend to, in a crisis, they'll go for the oxytocin, not for the cortisol like we do, like the male does. Just crash ahead and fix it somehow by blowing up something. They will want to connect to something, oxytocin, and let's see how we could rearrange things to make it work. Do you know what I mean? And those, going back to my original Inner Revolution book, those are, I was once asked by someone, where's all the cool heroes? I gave this idea of a cool revolution.
Right.
It's a cultural revolution, not like a violent one like the Mao one, but one where people learn about human beings and how it's nice to live, and they learn how they manage their own mind as part of their education. It's not considered religious interference with education. It's considered essential to manage your greed and manage your anger and manage your jealousy and all these things, which the inner science, Adhyatma Vidya of the Indian scientists, was therefore the king and queen of the sciences, was the inner science. The outer is also important, but the inner is more important. Right. So that's the model, and that's the source of, I think, His Holiness's optimism and my optimism, thanks to my learning from him and other great masters in his field. And then I could have learned it from Jesus without ever meeting him if I was more smart, but I was not. I was in a culture where I was being raised to be a general at West Point or something,
No, I see.
My family, I have Max Thurman is a cousin, Royster Thurman, Max Thurman, the one who went to Panama and this and that.
Right.
And so, but I'm the opposite of that. I'm for the cool warriors. And who are they? And I was stumped for a minute. And you mean only Gandhi and the Dalai Lama and Martin Luther King or something? Who else? And then, of course, I realized that half of humanity are cool warriors. Anybody who's ever had a family fight between father and son, or brother and brother, or whatever, a family argument, a fight, people just dissing each other. The women get in between. No, you didn't mean that, dear. Quiet down. No, don't fight. Don't be angry. Let's have a happy household here. They've always been there like that. They are cool heroes, and they're not doing it by dominating. Some of them might be muscle ladies, but mostly they just appeal to the better angels of the nature of the males.
Right.
Who anger is overflowing.
Yeah. In your book, Inner Revolution, you write about, and I'm quoting you now, the peaceful influence of meditative realization. Civilization has two-sided effect of making that society happier, wealthier, gentler, but also militarily weaker, an attractive target for aggressive outsiders, unquote.
Right.
Doesn't the rub lie there? Societies that become enlightened tend to become weaker to
Yes.
outside aggressions. How do you balance the two?
Well, that's simply recording the fact that for the last probably 4,000 years or something, we've had these male patriarchal societies. We record their disaster in the Mahabharata. We record them in the Iliad and the Odyssey. They're epic. So the Chinese had the Book of Songs, epic kind of thing, and which was when the warrior chiefs of the tribes became industrial, had urbanized, and they had professional armies, and they used their sort of tribal fighting in a way that became genocidal, like the destruction of Troy or the destruction of the Kauravas and the Pandavas, in the Mahabharata, where there's no winner, where the children of the victor gets killed, right, by Asvatthama, and then he wanders off with his dog, Yudhishthira, right, to heaven, because nobody wins, in other words. So it's not been like that. And there have been people winning. There's been a Mongol Empire, there's a British Empire, there's a Russian Empire, there's been Mauryan Empire years ago. Ashoka realized that was not the thing to do. He led the way. Again, India led the way. Ashoka was 500 years ahead of Constantine, and he didn't use the militant side of the Indian possibility. He didn't go back to the Mahabharata type of rulership. Instead, he went for the nonviolent side. He said, and don't have religious conflict. And his pillars prove that he was way ahead. Whereas Constantine started an Orthodox Christianity, where he created he twisted Jesus's actual teaching, Jesus being a person who was suffering under an imperialism, and he used it to justify imperialism. So he distorted it, actually, totally. So they're not comparable at all. India was 500 years ahead, and also with the Mauryan thing, and they also made it even 1,000 years ahead, maybe, in regard to the poorer sides of Eurasia, in East Asia and West Asia. Then the great motherland, plowing under the Himalayas and creating those glaciers and those mountains to flow down the alluvium, delicious mineral-rich waters, 35 times larger than the Nile, the growing season, even just in the Indus. So it's not anything racial. It's just a better economy. So the rulers were more tolerant, and they allowed the mystics and the yogis and the people, and they invented yoga for that matter, and more or less. And they didn't persecute them as Confucius said they should, and as the Westerners did. So that's that story. So that's just saying that therefore they would disappear. But on the other hand, okay, so India got conquered by the Brits, but 100 and some years later, you have the Beatles and Maharishi, and here comes the sun.
True.
And you have everybody doing yoga. You have the yoga industries everywhere, and where it's legal. Actually, the communists made yoga illegal.
Right.
Because the yoga makes someone feel better in their body, and even if they're not making something high spiritual, but they work against their arthritis every day, and they look at their diet more carefully, and they become more managing their own health better, and that's one aspect of it, and therefore it strengthens the individual again, precisely. So that's been something that had a slightly, and Jesus look at that. He gave his body to the Roman emperor. And then Constantine, and the early Christians, by the way, never worshipped the crucified Jesus. They worshipped the one who couldn't be killed, who rose up and went to go on a houseboat in Kashmir or wherever he did. Nobody knows what he did. And they're not, and the original ones were not into have come back and kill everybody, in the Trump implemented rapture or something, bombing everybody to smithereens. They're not doing that. So I'm saying now we've reached a point. There's a wonderful book by, my name thing. It'll come to me, the author's name, called Power, Nonviolence, and the Unconquerable World, Power, Nonviolence, and the Will of the People. And it shows the obsolescence of war. So now there's no winner to the wars. You can bomb the crap out of Vietnam. You can You can blast the Saddam Hussein and his troops, and then they'll throw you out later. You cannot control people anymore. The final blow to the sort of industrialization of hatred, which is modern industrial militarism, the final death knell of that is the Ukrainians with the drones droning away there. And there's no front line. You can't invade someplace anymore with human beings. You can destroy stuff, blow it up, but you can't actually invade it because they'll blow you out of existence. And the fancy $1 million missiles will just waste each other's money and it won't get anywhere. So therefore, now it's the opposite. The survival instinct used to be related to male aggression, but now male aggression is self-destructive. So the human survival instinct has to go rather to female interconnectingness, and it has to balance itself out like that. And the male will turn that aggression toward anything negative, anything destructive. You know, it's like the samurai will go to the Zen center.
Right.
And their destructiveness will go to the negative aspects of their own persona, and then they'll feel free of them, and they'll feel really good. And they'll go out there and have a tea ceremony with have a little tea ceremony. And versions of theology that say that we have a right to kill people who don't say Allah versus Shiva versus Krishna versus Yahweh versus whatever. And therefore, if they don't say our word, then we'll go kill them. That's also a thing of the past. That's just that's the twisting, and scholarship can find it. You know, Muhammad's sayings and his channelings were no doubt valid, but they were organized by jurists who were employed by Caliph of Damascus, who kicked out Ali, kicked out the peaceful side and emphasized conquest, of course, because they conquered everything in like 100 years, from Gibraltar to the Indus and through Central Asia, even Khorasan. So the kings, like the Romans, did that, and the Indians had a harder time doing that because they had Kshatriyas like Buddha and Mahavira themselves founding the spiritual movements. So the king, the first king to come really up with it, Ashoka, he said, no more Khadgavishaya, no more conquest, only soft power. Dharma Vijaya means soft power. Right? If Ashoka could have had the technology, he would have started Bollywood. And he would have sent beautiful films to Cyprus and Egypt and Rome and Greece and wherever, China.
Right. Another one of your scholarly preoccupations has been the conviction that material progress is not necessarily the ultimate good.
Right.
Does that still remain intact in the face of such a pervasive materialistic assault on the idea around the world?
Right. Well, you see, it's like my assault on scientific materialism. It's not an assault on what the scientists did, but they've got this fabulous data where they know like how the genes work, and they not quite completely. They're not really down to the bridge between the collapsing wave function and the genetic thing. They haven't quite connected those things, and they may never be able to in theory, but in practice, maybe they can. Actually, every woman, I have a joke I like to tell them, you guys can build $2 trillion worth of data centers, but I defy you to have AI produce a sentient being, which every lady can do with a little piece of sperm help from the male. She can do 3D printing of an Elon Musk, 3D printing of a Beyonce, create a magnificent human instrument of beauty and joy and intelligence and genius and inventiveness and so forth. But if that person wastes their life going berserk and harming other people, then it wasn't even worth it. But point is, they'll not be able to reproduce what we can already do. But the fact that they have such a beautiful detail of the way the material thing works, that is wonderful. And if they simply get out of the dogma, which they're not supposed to entertain dogma, Karl Popper the philosopher or scientists say theory gives way to experience. And they experienced 100 years ago that they couldn't pin down even the subtlest subatomic particle. So they can't even know what matter is. So how can they be materialists? You know?
Right.
Their mind is a force in nature. And, you know, what it is, they have to look at the mind, therefore, as well. And they will begin to do that. That's why the Dalai Lama has been talking for 40 years to all these hard scientists and listening to them and learning and enjoying them, but subtly trying to get them out of their dogmatism. But he's very polite. Their egos are huge. They have Nobel Prizes and this and that, and they're so smart. And how could they learn from some pre-modern guy who's so really cute? And I really like hanging out with him. But of course, he's really backward, pre-modern, blah, blah. Meanwhile, India, you know, I have a book I recommend to everybody nowadays. It's William Dalrymple's new book called
Yes, yeah, correct.
It's so fantastic. But the one humbling thing to the Westerners really should be, to the scientific materials should be, that for about 700 years, past in the Common Era centuries, since, you know, say time of, you know, AD, what they say, they call the CE, we say in intercultural studies, they didn't have the use of zero in their method. They didn't know what it was. So they couldn't count. They're like monkeys putting little pebbles in a bowl. What were they doing? Chinese at least had an abacus. Neither did the Chinese.
Right.
They got the zero from India, who had already had it for 1,000 years. And the word for zero is shunya. And that's the same word for Buddha, shunyata.
Absolutely. I was coming to that. Yes.
Patanjali is a Buddha too. He uses shunyata. He's not anti-Buddha. He may be a Brahmin, but he's not anti-Buddha. He's a Buddha himself, but he's writing for a Brahmin market instead of writing for the masses as Buddha was.
Right.
And all of them, Shankara, they were all enlightened. You know, all the Indian inner scientists were really wonderful.
Yeah.
And so that's what I would say. You know.
Yeah.
And they humble them, and therefore it's a matter of they got them. It was wonderful that they got free from the Inquisition and Galileo being muzzled and Bruno, you know, being burnt, you know, in the fire for going against the dogmas of the church, right? So then to get away from that, they abandoned having a soul, having a spirit, having a mind, and they decided they were nothing. So then you can't threaten me with hell, you know,
right.
to the church. And that was good. And then they looked at everything very carefully, and what they discovered is that mind and matter are interwoven, and that you know you have to fix. There's more than you can control by theory.
Right.
The zero means that there's space for more always. There's always more space. Zero is not nothing. Zero is space for everything. You keep adding zeros, you know.
Indeed, yeah. Just the last couple of things about your early life I'm rather fascinated by.
Yes.
I was reading it up this morning, and you mentioned a Mongolian monk called Geshe Wangyal who lived down the lane in New Jersey, who first introduced you to Tibetan Buddhism.
Yes.
And one of the first lessons that you were taught was about suffering. I want to understand how someone like you at that age thought of suffering as a fundamental aspect of life. Tell me what you felt at that time.
Well, actually, Buddha didn't teach. That's one of the misunderstandings of Buddhism, that suffering is the essence of life. Actually, Buddha did not teach that. Buddha taught
it was one of the ideas.
Well, no, he felt it was important to announce that the essence of life is nirvana, actually. He, commenting on his own Four Noble Truths, the third one, which is the result he wanted for everyone, which is what he discovered, was that joy is the essence of life. The life force is happiness and joy. But in order to get people to realize, to do that, they would have to understand what life is.
Absolutely.
If you don't know what life is and you're living in a false world, then you will suffer inevitably. So
exactly.
The things that the false world force you to do, gain wealth, gain power, do this, do that, be like Pharaoh and think that you're going to be immortal if you can gild your body after you die, and put chemicals in it, and so it still looks like something. Whereas many of your mind goes and gets another body. That's a total ignorance. And then the pyramid, you're suppressing all these people. They support an economy that supports you to be immortal. I mean, that's completely insane, actually. And it means that the Pharaoh had no idea what life was, actually. So the point is, and then if you know what life is, you don't fear death, because you know that life force is more strong than any particular embodiment. Like Mayank Chaya, 45 years ago or 52 years ago, whatever it was a little baby boy running around demanding more barfi. What are the cookie?
Yeah.
And this Mayank Chaya there, with your knowledge and your degrees and all your creativities and everything, is a completely different entity. There's not one cell in your body that's the same as that one. So all those cells of that little Mayank Chaya died to make room for more better cells. And then there's this mysterious one where we actually finally, this incredible sensitive instrument we have that can feel bliss to an extraordinary degree. Even the gods are jealous, I would say, I think. And because nothing can disturb it if we really, really expand it, if we really live nirvana. But they kept that secret because the Buddha knew that people wouldn't believe it. So he didn't want to think he was like selling some false snake oil. So he sort of let them think, oh yeah, and he let them be dualistic. Oh yeah, there's a place somewhere else where you can go to nirvana, most of the mendicants. And he hid the Mahayana for 500 years or 400 or 500 years, according to Mahayana, Nagarjuna and so on, which we think is correct. Actually, Westerners don't believe that, but we do. And so that's the point. So what I saw was, as a 20-year-old, come back to the question, was I was anxious about things. I was disillusioned about dancing on tables and getting drunk with vodka and drinking wine, and I was married at 17, 18 years of age. I was wealthy. I was in elite schools and I was having fun. And then I lost an eye in a personal accident. And then when I was unconscious during 2 or 3 days, apparently, I didn't know how long because I was unconscious, right? For some time, during that time I had all these visions, and then I woke up with a different, just a vision through one eye, and somehow that I had been reading something about Buddhism, about yogis, about mystics, about Sufis, about blah blah blah, and especially interested in Buddhism even then, just by my own affinities, but just in books, But then when I had that accident afterwards, my wife of the time was frightened, even freaked out. When I said, the minute I rose from that, I said, I'm leaving. I'm going to India. Let's go. Let's pack up. Life can slip out from us anyway. We have to find out what it is. We really have to find out. And Harvard is not teaching me that. They don't know themselves. I instinctively knew that. And Exeter, Harvard, I mean, you couldn't ask for like more sort of the colonialist, like education. And I knew it was not the case. And so I wanted to do that. And she was too scared and the whole thing. So then it took me time to break away a little bit. And I took actually, when I returned to Harvard to try to be a professor, when I realized I was not able to be a Buddhist monk again, which at first I wanted to be, the Harvard admission guy was so amused after 6 years later, from 62 to 67, 5 years later, or 61 to 67, the Harvard guy said, oh, look, you shows what a fool you were when you took leave of absence. I said, why? He says, look at this application for leave of absence. It doesn't say indefinite leave of absence. You wrote in here infinite leave of absence. And now you're back, he says. And I said, well, how do you know that is an infinite? Where do you think infinity is? I asked him. I was smart ass. But anyway, so that's how it happened, And so I wasn't. It wasn't the suffering that attracted me at all. It was it was basically a more practical, a little more skillful version of the unexamined life is not worth living of Plato, Socrates, who had said that around the time of the Greek axial age, same time as Buddha, a few centuries or two later. But it was Buddha doesn't say the unenlightened life will not worth living. Never. He would never say that. It's worth living, but it's going to be frustrating. It's going to be stressful.
Right.
Because once you recognize that, you will change your priorities and you will figure out how to understand what living is, and you will get rid of the stress and you'll enjoy life.
Indeed, yes.
So that actually is what it is. The reason that even the previous popes and Ratzinger, Benedict and John Paul were freaked out about Buddhism, they couldn't understand how it could be a world religion, because how can people live under the statement that life is suffering?
Yeah, but that's a fundamental misunderstanding of the Buddhist precepts. Yeah.
Totally. The whole thing, Buddhism is too Pollyanna-ish, and therefore they hid it.
Yes.
Hid it. It was esoteric more. At first, for 400 years, because he knew that people would find it a really hard sell. So he knew that sensitive people who are aware of suffering, and if you told them that actually if you revise how you experience, how your experiential, your aesthetics, if you revise that, you'll have a good time. They didn't want to hear that. They thought it's always going to be bad. So then they wanted to meditate and attain God. They wanted to become gods or something, They wanted to become Brahma, They fantasized that the gods were not suffering. And meanwhile, the gods are suffering from Buddha's point of view and Mahavira's point of view, both. And why? Because the gods are jealous of the humans.
Right.
Because the gods can't be Buddhas. They get complacent. And they're very blissed out. But then they know that they're not permanent, and they know that they might fall down if they act too self-indulgent. And there's a whole area of the world that is not. It looks really bad to them, and they want to hide from it. So they're sort of they live in gated communities.
Right.
And the human is somehow able to become a kind of being who's in the midst of all of nature and can be completely happy by becoming fully enlightened. And they want to do that, actually, and that's what they supported. Brahma, there's in the literature, Brahma totally supports Buddha.
Right.
He really likes.
You have described your state of bliss in the 60s, particularly between 62 and 66, rather strikingly. And I'm going to quote you again. You write, "When I look back at my experience during this time, I feel as if I existed in a state of orgasm that was diffused throughout my body and throughout my day, rather than concentrated in the genitals and focused on fleeting moments of excitation," unquote. That is quite some description. Do you continue to have that level of orgasm now?
Well, yes. Well, what I was saying there relates to what became all the rage in India from about 1,500 years ago, which has been completely lost, actually, because of the neo-anglicized cultural thing from the British domination. And that is Tantra. And in Tantra, not just the Buddhists, all the Indian neuroscientists, they got into the very subtle levels of the human nervous system, the vagus system, and not just the brain, but the whole body as a brain, because they were yogis and yoginis. And they realized that the human sensitivity and, kavya, Indian literary criticism, and also Indian Natya Shastra, theatrical criticism, is so incredibly sophisticated. Like any great modern movie star or director would their mind would be utterly blown by all of the subtle gestures, and this finger moves that way, the other, of the subtleties of the relationship of emotion and sensitivity and dance and gesture in the Indian aesthetics. And even in poetry, things like dhvani.
Right.
That guy at Yale, Harold Bloom, the greatest literary critic, and if he really learned Indian kavya and he read Abhinavagupta, his mind was blown. because he would recognize that they really understood, ragas, Ravi Shankar, Ustad Ali Akbar Khan. I mean, tabla playing, even the different rhythms is so sophisticated and
Absolutely.
so oriented to exploiting the capacity for pleasure of the human being. In fact, Kama Sutra is Master Zen Johnson
Right.
2,500 years before.
Indeed.
Like that, what the human being is capable of. And so that involves the mind and the understanding, and then it involves yoga of opening the sort of knotted nature of the sensitivity system, and also diet of not filling yourself up with plastic and weird substances, and natural vegetarianism that they did that from Ashoka. Ashoka has one pillar in the 3rd century BCE,
Right.
where he pleads with the public that he's on his way to trying to be vegetarian, but they're having still occasional peacock and a deer now and then once a week, and a peacock every day for probably the grandparents or something. In other words, he's like showing he's trying his best, and he's telling them to be more kind, and he didn't even have like some modern vegan notion, but he's already saying that. And
Right.
India, which came from people, it was not like China. They were able to get along with herder people. They had plenty of people herding cattle, and the Vedas are filled with cosmic cattle. Right? Indra liberates them from the dinosaurs and so on, and yet they naturally move toward vegetarianism as good for the health and the nervous system. And the heavy meat diet is not good. The nomad were very tough, but they had short lifespan.
Right.
And so these are. I don't know why I got into that topic, but I just was trying to correct. See, I consider my mission in life nowadays to try to correct the problem of defeatism of the human being on this planet. If we correct that, we will all be Minneapolitans. We will all be Magyar, Hungarians. Right. We will get rid of the nasty dictators. We won't accept theological dictators. We won't accept divine dictators. We won't accept political dictators.